It's my honor to be here to try to contribute to some our findings about how Chinese look at United States and also how they look at the American leaders and especially the presidential candidates, Donald Trump and also Hillary Clinton. So I would be happy to just present these figures and the numbers, and I try to limit my personal interpreter about what's the implications. So maybe we can discuss that later. All the year, every year we're doing the ask Chinese how they look at there's a different country all over the world. Usually the first half year and the second half year we'll check about what's the change of their opinion. America and also the countries like Japan, Russia always be a very the hot countries that people will pay attention to, and especially in the Chinese news media and also in the internet media. The people will talk a lot about this international news, and even the debate between Trump and Hillary attract quite a big audience group in China, and actually that's the morning time of the debate when it happened. So it's around 92% of audience they watch the debate live, by the cell phone. So actually it's people will say, it's like some vote. It's not an event only happening in the United States. It's something like people will pay quite close attention to that. So here I will try to use a different part of this data. This data also comes from several different research. So it's not from SAM. So the time is a little bit different, and also the topic is also a little bit different too. So the first, the figures I will try to present to you about the people's feeling, the favorable feeling to the different countries. And here we can see the United States doing it's like in the media level. Russia doing the high. Japan is the lowest. South Korea is pretty high because this is the figures number at the end of last year. The South Korea is pretty high. North Korea is very quite close to the United States. So now it's before you can see the North Korea is a relatively little bit higher, but now it's become more it's lower. So this year, actually, I estimate there will be some change will happen, especially about South Korea, and also about North Korea. The question is about who become the stronger, no matter from the situation. Consider about the power, economic power, military power, and especially we think about the near future. What's the change of the status of the United States and China? Well, this question was asked the Chinese interviewee. You can see that people still believe the United States is relatively stronger in economy and also military, but in the near future, people believe China will become stronger. So I think that's a very important social psychological foundation that when they check about the relationship between the United States and China, the factors is about how United States trade China or China trade the United States. Well, matters because people will feel that now the country, China is not that strong so far, but would it be stronger? So that's why the attitude from other countries it was a kind of stimulation, a factor what happened psychologically. But also we can see the China public psychologist was kind of a relative optimistic about the development of Chinese international status. So this country, actually these questions again will try to prove who would be the leader of the world. So we have the tracking study from the past several years, and we can see it's kind of quite a stable perception about China, but it's kind of shrinking the trends about the status of the United States. Who would be the superpower of the world? And those people believe China would be finally, they will eventually will substitute the United States is about half of the general population. But still, we have a pretty kind of proportion of people believe China will never be stronger than the United States. Actually, around more than 10% of people believe China now is already stronger than the United States. And that's the figure, the data at the end of last year. I see a couple of polling results were generated by the American organizations. At least one of the projects that shows that about 55 or 53% of American public believe China is already economically stronger than the United States. But for most of Chinese, they believe that will be happening in the near future, not now. Also, we'll check about how the public look at the relationship, the interaction between these two countries. Still, there's the big majority percent of Chinese public believe the relationship between two countries is very important. If I say that is not the most important, actually a little bit higher percentage say that the relationship between China and Russia is more important than the United States. That's happening last year because always the importance of the United States and China become the #1 international relations among in the Chinese mind. Does the U.S. give respect to China? 41.59 say yes, 47.8 say no. So that's, I think that's an interesting question because if the public believe that the country will become stronger, if you feel that you don't get enough respect, so that's why partly explain a kind of unfavor attitude to United States in some way. Does China and the U.S. trust each other? 42.5 say yes, 48.7 say no. So I think there's a kind of public intention there. Could China-U.S. achieve cooperation and realize peace? 45% 6 say yes. 24.8 say neither can achieve cooperation nor realize peace. And 14.6 said could achieve cooperation but couldn't realize peace. 15% said couldn't achieve cooperation but could realize peace. So that's why I think American leaders say that the relationship between the two countries is a very complicated relationship. I think the result from the public is also shows the complication of the relationship. 68% say they don't support the U.S. government's strategy to, they try to transfer the military resource away from the Middle East and more towards Asia. and 65.7% say if Korea and North Korea, South Korea were united peacefully, there would be no need for U.S. military presence in Korea Peninsula. 15% is around 60% of people say the U.S. military presence in Asia should be decreased. More than 80% say if the conflict between mainland China and Taiwan happened, the United States should not send troops. Interesting, if people check about, do they believe American voters, they choose Barack Obama as a president is a good choice. 55% say yes, they believe yes, and also the more than 50% of Chinese public, they do have a confidence for Obama's regarding his ability to deal with world affairs, but very limited percent of Chinese public like his way towards China. So that means the China public not challenge President Obama's capacity to deal with the world issues, but they do not like his way to try China. This is also an interesting result because we are checking about how Chinese people look at the attitude to the different president, and we check about their favorable attitude to the president, especially the last year of their term. President Clinton in 2000, he got a 56% Chinese public say that I like this guy. That's exactly after his three-nose policy about Taiwan. Because the first term of Clinton, he wins a relatively low favorable attitude to him, but at the end of his second term is pretty high. And interestingly, the President George Bush was started from a very low favorable attitude, but at the end of his term, he earned a pretty high favorable attitude because 63% of people say, I like this guy. So far, Barack Obama was the lowest president to get a favorable attitude from China. It's less than 50%. People say, I like this guy's attitude. Then always we try to assume if the interviewees are American voters, you'll vote which candidate as the president of the country. As always, Democrats, usually Democratic candidates, get a higher support from Chinese public. No matter about between the President Bush and George Bush and Clinton, and President George Bush and Al Gore, the Democrats relatively win high. So if we compare the people's attitude to Hillary and Trump, the effect is also there. The 37% of Chinese say they have a confidence about Hillary's capacity to deal with international issues. As for 35% of people said that they lack of enough confidence. But compared to what Trump got, Trump is only 22% with a confidence, and is around 41% without confidence. But of course, relatively, people have a less understanding or less information, knowledge about Trump, and there was a more knowledge information about Hillary. Also, if people check about the possibility of the result of this year's American election, if there will be impact the security situation in Northeast Asia, and people, if if we compare the comparison between Trump and Hillary, 80% say if Trump elected as a president, it would make it stabilized. 29 is around 30 say it would make no impact. 44 say it would make it destabilized. 18% say don't know. The difference between Trump and Hillary is about more people believe if Hillary win the election, the situation will be more stabilized there. Of course, we also cite a little bit data from the American side of the China and Sino-U.S. relations, because this is a very latest data. And if we ask questions, if the China now is trying to realize this so-called China dream, if it will provide any impact about the people. The American is 12% said they heard about this concept, and it's about around 0.5% of people say they believe the China dream could be realized, and 43% say China dream, if a realization of China dream would provide help to the world. Compared to the Chinese would be more positive about the China dream realization, but compared to the result from Brazil, Indian, American would be the least positive attitude about realization of China dream. And what kind of factors will negatively impact the realization of the China dream? Many people mentioned the corruption in China, but that's also the important factors were mentioned by Chinese public too. American was as a top factor. Indian and also Brazil believe that's also one of the top factors. Other factors were mentioned about the gap of income, and also about the big population and aging problem, and also the political system itself would be expected to be reformed. So if we check about the data here, I have a very quick summarization is that China always see American is a very important the leading country in the world, and also become the importance between these two countries is the most important international relationship. And also they really care about any interaction what happened between these two countries, and also pay close attention about the event is like an election that happened in the United States. But I would say there's kind of a situation changing happened. The change itself is not only about China is look at the American the government policy about the rebalancing, go back to Asia Pacific rebalancing the policy, but do you feel that the kind of more clear strategy happened is about to contain the China's rising. But I think also from the American side, when they check about the Chinese action and changing, that's also believe China with a kind of a change of strategy. So that's why finally I tried to provide a kind of a frame to present my understanding what happened about the so-called the change. There's a three concepts here called passive, progressive, and aggressive. The passive way is basically say we accept the status quo. Usually anything will happen, we say, okay, we try to discuss it with other partners. We're not doing a very strong action about that. So that's a typical, the attitude was taken by Deng Xiaoping and Jiang Zemin, and also even until Hu Jintao. We call this so-called passive. The progressive, a little bit different, is about, we need, if there's any other the key roles, if they're doing anything first step, I would do second or the third step. So this is called a progressive strategy. Aggressive strategy would do action first. So I try to change the status quo. I put Hu Jintao at the passive, that status. But Xi Jinping is more like a progressive way. So that's why in the East, the Diaoyudao, or in the South China Sea, the attitude is basically any state key roles is they're doing any action first, so China would do 2 or 3 steps. Of course, the Philippines and Japan and also North Korea, they kind of more or less, they have a kind of aggressive action. But if they take any small action, China's responsive way would be take the 2 or 3 steps as responsive to that. The U.S. I put at the progressive way, and if China doing any action to U.S. was kind of responsive to that. But I put the Trump and Hillary in a different place. Trump, if we check about his international security policy, is more like he would be more passive. I mean, passive, it's not like as strong as President Obama, but about his international trade policy, it's more like aggressive. But Hillary's policy is maybe vice versa. He's more like a passive about trying to keep a status quo of international the trade policy, but about security, international security policy would be more aggressive. So that's why to Chinese public it's very hard to choose which one would be their favor. Always was a kind of negative side. But the elites and the general public have a different choice. And the general public would be more pro-Hillary, and elites were more pro-Donald Trump. The reason is that they become, Donald Trump is a business person who will be more pragmatical and flexible when they really elect as a president. So that's the expectation. So the framework would be not, maybe not absolutely right, but that's my frame. I tried to interpret the attitude, the China's towards other government leaders, and also maybe how the international community check about the Chinese leaders and other leaders in the Asia countries. Thank you.